Beautiful people, welcome back to the second hour of LoveBabz, LoveTalk on Babz Rawls-Ivy. And that is Sylvester Salcedo. Did I say it right? Unmute yourself. You're going to have to unmute yourself. You're on mute. Hi, Sylvester. So let me tell you something about Sylvester. I met him.
Good morning to all the Babz fans.
Good morning to you. I met Sylvester. Do people call you Sly? Do people call you Sly?
Yes, some people do. Some people do, but I usually just prefer Sylvester. But Sly, we'll be Sly today. I mean, after all,
I'm gonna call you what you want me to call you. So I met Sylvester at the International Festival of Arts and Ideas kickoff, the season kickoff at Gateway, and he came up to me, and we struck up a conversation, and it's just been a love affair ever since. So I've been trying to get him on the show since we met in late April. For Pan Asian
American Pacific Islander Heritage.
Yes.
Month. We're about 3 days late, but that's typical of Filipinos. You know, we're always late, but that's all right.
It's just that's all right.
Our schedules just could not match, but it's fine. So number one, I'm really delighted, happy, extremely excited to be here with you this morning, and with all the Babz Love, Babz Talk fans out there. I don't know, is Harry on? He's sort of frozen here on my screen. And
Harry's in the background. He's hanging out doing other stuff. Okay. So
well, I want to say hello and saludos to Harry, and I thought he was going to join us, but that's fine.
So we missed out on the month, but that's all right because we're gonna rock out today.
Absolutely.
So. Give me some background on the Asian Pacific Islander history. Where should we start with understanding the history of Asian Pacific Islanders?
Yes. Well, number one, I have to admit I'm not an expert on the subject matter or how the actual month was picked, because my only role is the fact that I do have the Asian Pacific Islander face, and the fact that, by background, my father's Filipino and my mom is ethnically Chinese, but born and raised in the Philippines because her parents, or her dad specifically, had immigrated to the Philippines, courtesy of the U.S. Army back before the turn of the century, 1896, somewhere there. And so, but focusing on this whole idea of the Asian Pacific Islander History or Heritage Month, let me share what I believe and what I've come to understand. It's sort of trying to follow up on the idea of when Black History Month was established, I think. And so I think a lot of activists, a lot of people working in various communities said, well, the African American History Month is a great idea, but we'd like to expand that. So, for example, the Latinos and Hispanic Americans, I know there's a whole huge argument about that, whether they're called Latinos or they're called Hispanics, but their month is dedicated to focusing on their history. And to me, it's just a vehicle for a way to increase awareness and somehow incorporate it in the job site or in schools and so on. So the key to me is just a sense of awareness, which is all good. So I think for Latinos, it's kind of funny. It's mid-September to mid-October. So I don't know why that is. And so the same thing with this May being designated as Asian Pacific Islander History Month. I mean, I should have Googled it or try to find out more about.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Who decided it? Yeah, but the key here is, for me, if you ask me personally, years ago, if I was at the big board meeting, I would have told everybody, don't pick May, because you know why, Babz?
Why?
May is not a good month for anything, because the college kids, for them, that's exam week. Look at or already graduation month, right? So nobody's around to develop programs. And who are the best people to who have time and who have the energy and who have the focus to try to bring out their whole heritage, may it be Latino, African American, or Asian Pacific Islander. So in May, and what a worse group, the Asians, right? They're going to all be studying. They're not going to be sitting around trying to celebrate and do rehearsals for all kinds of dances and reciting poetry. They're saying, no, I'm back to my biochemistry lab and I'm going to be doing all my stuff. So that's just me personally. But of course, I would have never studied, so I would have gone to all the Asian Pacific Islander parties. And so
now you're a retired attorney.
Yes. Yeah,
you're kind of young to be retired. Why are you retired?
Well, I'm retired. Okay, so I'll tell you the story. I'm not supposed to be retired until I'm 80 because I was married the first go around, but unfortunately it ended in divorce in 2003. And I was married to the first Puerto Rican superintendent of Bridgeport. That's kind of what brought me back to Connecticut. I mean, I was here years ago for eighth grade. So the reason I'm retired is, number one, I'm 65 today. I turned 65 last Thanksgiving. Pardon?
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So 65, obviously, my Medicare card is kicked in. And being an attorney, I remembered about, it's about 4 years ago. I was 61 years old. And I went to the Social Security office in Ansonia because as an attorney, I had a lot of elderly clients or young children because I did probate and I did juvenile defense work, for contract with the state, our firm, my partner, attorney Fran Hodges from Bridgeport. So I was in the Social Security office one day and this lady looked at, because all the accounts that I have for the elderly clients I have, their Social Security, which of course I'm sort of in charge of as the conservator or something like that. And I have to make sure that, nothing's stolen or there's no hanky-panky. So the lady looks at me and she said, oh, attorney, you're going to be turning 62 like in 2 months or something like that. And she said, you can go in Social Security. I said, yes, I've read about it in the magazine or something like that, this and that, the other. And so I said to her jokingly, I said, yeah, but my wife, who's 20 years my junior, said, no, you're going to be working until you're 80 or 85 because you have to make money for the kids' college tuition and graduate school and medical school and all the rest of this. So she turns to me, she goes, you're going to get like $1,100 at age 62, right? And then you're going to get $1,600 if you wait until your retirement age, which is like, I think for me in 1956, it's like 66 and 3 months or something like that. And if you wait till 70, you get the big prize, right? You get like $2,500 a month. So I said, well, $1,100 a month, probably, you're not really going to be able to live on that alone in Connecticut. And then she said, oh, no, because she's looking at the TV screen. She goes, oh, no, but I see that you have 2 young children. minor children? I said, yes, they're like 6 and 4, however old they were at the time. And she said, no, they also get a check from Social Security. And I said to myself, well, usually that happens like if you're disabled or there's some sort of, SSI disability or something like some other issue that the children would be, given a check. She said, no, it's only because of their age. And she said, so long as you're the primary caretaker, which I am, as you can see, I'm wearing my stay-at-home dad apron because it's my uniform of the day, right? I mean, I pack up Leo and Lucia, wake them up, make their breakfast, make their lunch, and then send them off to school and wait for them. And clean the house and all the rest of that in the meantime. And talk to you and everybody in our Babz, LoveBabz Talk fan base. So she said, no, they also get a check. And I said, oh, I didn't realize that. I said, just because of their age? She said, yeah. So she told me what it was, $500, something like that. So now I'm saying $500 for both? No, she said each. So I said, no, well, now this is really, the calculations is going up, right? So now it's like, I'm going to get $2,100 or $2,200. So I went home to tell my wife about it. She said, get out of here. You're old, but you're not going to get that kind of check. So long and short of it is during COVID, the lockdown, obviously the kids were home for school. And our son, for years, he's always told me, Dad, you have to get on YouTube because you have to gain some, what is it called? Like subscribers. And then you can sell merch. And I'm thinking, what is all this stuff? I mean, I can't look at his iPad because they're playing all these games which make me dizzy, right? I mean, even way back then with Pac-Man, I could never play that game with my friends because that thing it just makes me dizzy. So one day they fell asleep early and I said, let me look at this YouTube thing. And so I watched one tutorial after another and I figured out that you didn't really need to buy these $2,000 cameras and tripods and lighting and all this. You could just do it really with your iPad. So I tried it out the next day and it worked. So I said, well, let me develop a program which I called Back to Sicily. So I made a YouTube channel called Back to Sicily. And this is our daughter's, I think, grade 1 homework from the John C. Daniels School. So it has her brother, mom, me, and then my parents, and then my wife's parents. But on my wife's mother's side, her grandparents go back to Sicily. Right?
Oh,
they came from Sicily. Right. So then I said to myself, well, could you live in Sicily on Social Security alone? And the short answer is yes, because I went there last September until December. And I couldn't bring the kids because my wife wouldn't let them go because, back in September, the kids under 12 could not receive their vaccination until I think when I got home in Christmas. So that was sort of the background about retiring. And then I sort of thought, well, it's a matter of, do you want money or do you want time? And I decided I'd really rather have time with the kids, time for myself. I mean, my wife, she works and she's an eye surgeon. She makes enough money for herself and her retirement. I said, keep all your money. Just let me go to Sicily with the kids. And so that's how this whole thing with retirement started. And then, of course, I'm now wanting to go into the arts. That's why I saw you at the Gateway opening and welcoming reception a month or so ago. And I'm really excited to do that. But, one of the things I wanted to bring up during our time today is, I don't know, I kind of keyed up here. I don't know how much you get to play something from, copyright of songs, but because we were titling our segment today, like Filipino Talk, Filipino Love, I wanted to touch on 3 topics, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
So I was going to start with Filipino Love, right? And I was going to start us off with this song. And I don't know if I can play it without running into copyright. I can run maybe like 10 seconds of it, I think.
Yeah, I think you can play about 10 seconds of it.
Okay, shall we do it? Ready? Okay,
yes.
Let's do it. Let me do it. Let me see. Let me see if it's loud enough.
Okay.
Okay,
so
ready?
He's gonna play a song.
I'm gonna play a song.
Okay.
Oh, actually, I'm gonna turn. I don't know if I can turn my, and you'll see. Can you see who it is? Kind of.
No, I see you.
Here, listen to. I'll run 10 seconds. You recognize that sweet voice?
Oh yes, yes, that's Nat King Cole.
Exactly, exactly. So that song, let me just turn it up. So that song is in Filipino is called Dahil Sa'yo, which means because of you. And it's one of the most popular love songs in all of Filipino history, in my opinion. And it's an old song way before my time. I think it was composed in the pre-war, before World War II. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of artists over the years have recorded it. And to me, this is one of the best versions I've ever heard, because obviously anything Nat King Cole sings is just perfect. And I have a whole bunch of his albums in Spanish, and so that's why I thought maybe Harry would be joining us. And his voice, it's just so mellifluous. It's just like honey dripping over you, right? And then just the emotions and with language. I mean, this is Tagalog he's using, and I think the background here is this is a concert from 1962 when he went to the Philippines, I think for the first time. Mm-hmm. And in fact, at the concert, he didn't even have time to memorize the words, so he had to read it from his music stand. But in terms of, if you know Tagalog, the way he enunciates he really just captures the emotions of the song, of how truly, it's like, because of you, the world is everything, and I love you and you love me, and the world is just great. So I thought on that note, I was going to bring up a couple of things about Filipino love. So This is going to test you. I'm going to mention 3 names: Loida, Nicholas, Lewis. Does that ring a bell?
Is that
Loida, Nicholas Lewis?
I don't know. Is that somebody's wife?
Yes, that is the wife of Reginald Lewis.
Yes.
Right. Reginald Lewis is the first African-American billionaire. Right. So I think he's from Philadelphia, somewhere there. Okay. Second one, Cecilia, also known, AKA, as Sissy Suyat. Cecilia Suyat.
Is that okay, go ahead.
She is the wife. Obviously, it didn't even ring a bell with me, so don't feel bad. But she is the second wife of Justice Thurgood Marshall. Yes. After his first wife died of, I think his first wife died of cancer or some medical issue. So Justice Marshall and Sissy were obviously a power couple in Washington, but unknown. Like, I mean, the Filipino community, we would know this but for programs like the Asian American Pacific Islander History Heritage Month. That's the only way we would find this out, right? Because normally you'd be listening to other things, whatever's going on in contemporary art or contemporary music, but you would never really even take the time to know who she is. But it's worth it. So then the other one is, well, it's going to give it away, but Elaine Chappelle, which is Dave Chappelle's wife. Yeah, she's also Filipina. So that's sort of our Filipino love segment. The second one I want to bring up to you, because of this whole Asian Pacific Islander history, is David Fagan. Does that ring a bell?
No, I don't know David Fagan.
So here is what I found on the Google. So David Fagan, it says turncoat hero. Basically, if you can make up the picture, he's obviously African American, and he was a young man from Tampa, Florida. And I think he was born. Oh, I lost my notes. Where did I put my notes about David Fagan? So he was actually born let me see. I think I forgot. But anyway, so what this is actually a book written by somebody, a professor or something like that. But it's about David Fagan. So David Fagan basically was a Buffalo soldier, right? African-American soldier. Yes. Mainly after the Civil War, right? They fought in the Western expansion. They fought a lot of the Native Americans in the westward expansion from the St. Louis Arch westward all the way to the California beaches. So David Fagan was a young man, I mean, typical of young African Americans in Tampa, Florida during his years. I think it said that he was, I'm trying to think, just beating rocks in the swamps in Tampa, right? Being paid $1 a day. And then they had all the other convicts, the African American prisoners. And those guys were doing the same thing he was, except that they weren't being paid. They were just being given a bowl of something to eat for the day or something like that. I mean, obviously we know the horrific conditions. But what happened to David Fagan, he was a private. He joined the army and obviously became a skilled marksman. Mm-hmm. And he fought in the Spanish-American War in Cuba. And when the Spanish-American War ended, because people don't understand this, but the Spanish-American War was basically only 4 months long, from May 1st, when Admiral Dewey defeated the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay, and then it ended 4 months later, by the end of August. So David, at the end of the battles in Cuba, and at the end of 1898, he went back to stateside. And then there's something called the Filipino American War, which most of us really don't know. I didn't know about it. Most of my family in the Philippines, they don't know about anything about the Filipino American War, because most of our focus is what happened during World War II forward. It's like your memory, you have this historical amnesia. Like my father never mentioned it to me, and my father was a World War II veteran. I mean, he was a survivor of the Bataan Death March. Mm-hmm. And of course, that one, he never, of course, like many of his contemporaries, they never spoke about it, their experiences with their family, which of course now we say is such a shame, because we could have recorded it, we could have put it in a journal and preserved it for history. But now, of course, we don't know what the heck happened to them, except that thank God they were alive, so that I could be here, chatting with you, and I could have a family. So anyway, so back to David Fagan. What he did was he was so horrified by what was happening during that Philippine-American War. And this is one of the reasons why I think things like the Asian American Pacific Islander History/Heritage Month is very useful for us as citizens, everyday Americans, right? Because the key is to become aware. And then when you're aware of it, maybe it will pique your interest, maybe it won't, but maybe somewhere out there, some young student will say, hey, I heard on Babz Talk, Babz Love, something about this David Fagan. I want to know more about him. I'm going to run to the library, or I'm going to get to Google and find out more about his life. Because what happened is, so he basically what happens is he defects from the American army, because I'm sure they didn't treat him well. I'm sure there was not a equal opportunity officer, listening to his complaints and filing the proper claim, right? Right. So which will bring me to my sort of last topic here about. So I wanted to do a segue into the third thing I wanted to bring up to you, which is I always love the word on the street that you have. So I'm going to share with you. From David Fagan, the word on the street in my hometown here in Orange. Okay. And the word on the street, actually, it's several words, but the acronym, I never heard of this before. I mean, maybe slightly in an oblique way, but it's DEI, right? DEI. Mm-hmm. Now, when I came home from Sicily, and I was beginning to run around Connecticut trying to find out how I can kind of find out about, the people in the art world in Connecticut, somebody told me about this concept of idea, that people in the arts world in Connecticut were very focused on this idea, of this concept of idea, which is IDEA. So I think it's inclusion, diversity, equity, and I don't know, acceptance or admission, I don't know, something along those lines. But anyway, 2 weeks ago here in Orange, because, I had been away. I was in Palermo, September, October, November. So first of all, our children, Leonardo and Lucia, I sent them to New Haven 6 years ago to the John C. Daniels School, which is in the Hill neighborhood, right? Mm-hmm. By Congress Street and Baldwin Street and Ward Street. So this year is the first time they came back to the Orange public schools, because my plan was, as I said, the plan was to was to go back to Sicily, right? I was planning to bring them with me, and the three of us would live on our Social Security check, right? The 1,100 for me and the 500 for each of them, and see if we could find housing, food, whatever they needed to go to school and learn Italian. And so, well, of course, their mom wouldn't allow them to go because they didn't have their COVID vaccination. Although I was trying to tell my wife that there were plenty of American families, with Sicilian heritage, going back and forth between New York and Palermo, New York, California, but anyway, she wouldn't have any of that. So anyway, so I want to now segue to the word on the street in Orange, which is, of course, this DEI, which now I understand is diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. So, oh, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So while I was in Palermo, because I helped the kids get enrolled, take them out from John C. Daniels and enroll them, correctly, paperwork and all that, and medical stuff from the nurse office into the Orange schools. And so after 2 weeks, I left because I left September 22. So the first PTA meeting, Parent-Teacher Association meeting that they had, and then in October and in November, I'm participating, but like this, by Zoom. It's like 1:00 in the morning in Palermo, and it's 7:00 p.m. here in Orange when all these parents are and the principal are having their meeting. So I never heard DEI discussed until about 2 weeks ago. And apparently here in Orange today, and actually it expands because at the high school level, we have the Amity regional.
Yes, high school.
So it's 3 towns. It's Woodbridge, Bethany, and us in Orange. And apparently for, I don't know, several months now, this has been a brewing controversy in this neck of the woods, right? It's like people are voting against it on one hand because they say it's, here it is. The background is the superintendent apparently put a line item for, I don't know, 70,000, 80,000 for a DEI coach. And people they just lost their minds. They said, no, you're not spending that money on that nonsense. And then I've found out since, because I've attended a board meeting now, I've chatted with some of the other parents and trying to just feel out like, what is this whole controversy that's making people, lose their minds? And they said that some people are really hiding the real reason why they're opposed to it. It's not because of the money, right? I mean, this is a very wealthy neighborhood, but because DEI equals CRT, right? The whole critical race theory yes. issue, which now, of course, makes people's head blow up twice as much. So I know while I was in Palermo, obviously I'm reading the news here. And of course, I'm reading what else but New Haven Independent and following all the news, the latest breaking news. So I was kind of aware in the side of my mind about Guilford, right? Because Guilford, there were all kinds of battles there with the local, I think at the time it was the politicians, and then somehow it crept into the school system and the board meetings and all the rest of that. So now it's like Guilford is the poster child in Connecticut for the whole CRT, DEI controversy. And now I don't know if we in Orange, Woodbridge, and Bethany are sort of the second, follow-on echelon to that. But I just thought that what people really need to do, or my recommendation anyway, they don't have to do it, but my recommendation is to look at these monthly celebrations and commemorations and awareness platforms. The Black History Month, which of course I think it's really been established. I think the Hispanic Latino month, it's kind of there, but still has a way to go. I mean, I don't think it's quite reached the level of Black History Month. And definitely, the Asian guys and the Filipinos, forget about it, right? Nobody knows the Filipinos. I mean, I have to walk around with this globe, right? I should really put a necklace on this and show people, okay, look, folks, this is the Philippines over here, right? Because even that, Babz, right? Asian Pacific Islander History Month, when you say Asia, most people, what do they associate it? China, Japan,
China, Japan,
right? Korea, maybe,
yeah.
right? Now, because of all these young Koreans with all those musical groups, the little K-pop or pop,
K-pop.
right? So I mean, I haven't bought an album since the Beatles, since the Rolling Stones in the '70s, and Otis Redding and those guys. But anyway, so Asian Pacific, usually people think China because that's a big thing, and you got Chinese food and Chinese everything, and then Japan because of the Japanese cars and all that, and then Korea because of K-pop. But you don't think about. Well, of course, in Asia you also have the South Asians, right? You have the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, and then you can go to Southeast Asia, and that's the one where you have Philippines, Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma, well now Myanmar, and Indonesia. And look at how huge. I mean, people don't even realize this, but Indonesia is huge. I mean, it's got two parts, and Brunei basically is kind of a dot like Singapore, and Malaysia. So, but those countries, right? Let's say even just talking about China, Japan, Korea, the big three. We, the United States, have never really occupied them except for a brief period after World War II in Japan, right? General MacArthur was sort of what did they call him? Like the American shogun, right? He was we were trying to convert or at least encourage the Japanese to get away from the sort of emperor focus that the emperor was all God and he was everything. And we wanted to instill American democracy, right? We want to give women rights to vote, et cetera, things like that. But the Philippines is different, right? Because if you go back to David Fagan and that Filipino-American War, the United States of America, we occupied the Philippines. It was basically ours, just like Puerto Rico is today, right? And speaking of that, that's why you see here behind me this beautiful painting, right? This is actually, Babz, this is kind of what I also wanted to introduce to our friends at Connect. Right? This is my pitch. This is my connect. So this is something I call the three-way dialogue. I don't know if you can see, but over here.
I see it. Yes.
Yeah, it's this three-way dialogue. And then here it says Maria and Maria and Maria. Well, it's Spanish for the Y means and. And then you get these three flags, which of course, Harry will recognize this is the Puerto Rican flag. This is the Cuban flag. And this is the Filipino flag. Mm-hmm. Because these are the last three big Spanish colonies that Spain lost at the end of the Spanish-American War, right? They lost the war, so they had to give these three huge colonies. This is the last of that. I mean, they had all of South America, right, from Mexico all the way down to Argentina and Chile. I mean, that was all Spanish colonies, and of course, on the other side you had Brazil, which belonged to Portugal, because those guys, along with the Pope, they sort of drew a line and said, okay, to the left of this line belongs to Portugal, to the right belongs to Spain. But way, all the way to the right on the other side of the world is the Philippines. And that also belonged to Spain. So these last three colonies of Spain fell under US influence. But Cuba, we did occupy it for brief periods, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, in the 1890s, right after the war, 1899, 1900, 1901. And then they elected their first Cuban president. But then, I don't know, it fell apart. And then the Americans had to go back in again and send a governor general for another 2 years. But since about 1903, 1904, Cuba has really had their own presidents, more or less, of course, with a lot of influence from us, until this guy came around, right? This is Fidel. Right. So these three, because this is a painting by a Filipino painter. So the meaning here is these are the last three large Spanish colonies. So it's Maria Cuba, Maria Puerto Rico, and Maria Philippines, which is under Maria Concepcion, Maria Fe for faith or Philippines, and Maria Perpetua, Mary Perpetual, which is the P for Puerto Rico. And I kind of made those up because I'm digress for a moment. When I was in the Navy, I served 4 years of active duty, right, from age 22 to 26. And then I became a public school teacher in Boston. And I taught in a largely African-American community called Roxbury, if you're familiar with the Boston.
I know it.
Yeah. Okay. If you know Boston. So in this school, it was called Madison Park High School. And I didn't want to be a Spanish teacher. What I wanted to be was to be an ESL teacher, right? To teach a lot of these. Back then in the 80s, you had the controversy with the Contras down in Central America. A lot of refugees were coming up from El Salvador and Nicaragua up, and they settled them in the Boston area, a lot of these youngsters. So the Boston public schools had a huge influx of young kids going into the public schools who needed to learn English. And that's the crowd, the group I wanted to teach with. But I don't know, the contract said, no, those jobs were going to go to the more senior teachers. So the only jobs that they could give me was to teach Spanish, which, I mean, I can speak some Spanish, but I'm not fluent by any means, and certainly not certified. But anyway, long and short of it is, one day, 3 new students show up in my classroom, and they're all named Maria de Pina, because they're from Cape Verde, right? Cape Verde, which is the islands off the Azores, which used to be a Portuguese colony. So their name is Maria de Pina, Maria de Pina, Maria de Pina. And I said to myself, I was sort of thinking out loud, how am I going to tell one Maria from the other? And some wise guy in the back of the classroom said, Mr. Salcedo, you should ask them what their middle name is, right? So then I said Maria. Of course, they couldn't speak English and they couldn't really speak Spanish. They speak Portuguese or the Cape Verdean Creole. But I said, ¿cómo se llama your, nombre segundo? So they said, oh, yes, so Maria Faye, right, from Maria Faith, and Maria Conceição, I'm Maria Conception. And Maria, so I thought of this, Maria, and Maria, because this happened in April of 1986, which is when there's a whole, protest against Marcos, the president or then dictator of the Philippines, right? That was going on. So I had this whole Philippine thing going on in my mind. And then I said that Concepcion, Fe, and Perpetua is basically Philippines, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. So for like 30 years now, this thing's been rolling around in my head until this painter put this together. So these 3 personalities are America's enemy number 1 during their time in history. Right. So Fidel Castro, I mean, he'd been president, dictator of Cuba from 1959 through, I think, 8 presidents, right? From, I think it was Eisenhower was president, maybe even Truman, all the way to Clinton, well, past Clinton. And after Clinton, Bush the first, was it Bush the first? No, Bush was after. Yeah. So anyway, and all the way up to Clinton in 1998. Anyway, so this guy in the middle from Puerto Rico, I was really curious to see if Harry would know who he is, but he is Don Pedro Albizu Campos, and he is Afro-Puerto Rican, Harvard graduate, Harvard Law School graduate, and he was supposed to be the valedictorian. But because of racism, some of his professors wouldn't let him take their exams. Therefore, he could not get his grade point average to be declared a valedictorian. And so he was all upset. He went home to Puerto Rico and became a nationalist, right? He was part of the whole Puerto Rican nationalist movement. And his history is interesting because he gets all beat up and locked in prison by the FBI, and they smear campaign, the whole works. So this poor guy, and the reason, however, he's in a U.S. Army uniform is because just like our good Buffalo soldier brother David Fagan, he was in the U.S. Army. He was an officer in the U.S. Army, and he was also upset because he was dark skinned. They wouldn't let him serve. With the white soldiers. So they put him with the Buffalo soldiers, right? Again, those were the times. Now, the last personality here, this man is named Don Emilio Aguinaldo. And he's also in his little army uniform here because he's the guy who declared himself the first president of the Philippines back in 1898, soon after the United States defeated Spain. But then the US, with President McKinley, said, wait a minute. Don Emilio, you're not going to be quite the president of the Philippines, because we're going to take over your land here, and we're going to bring something called benevolent assimilation, which means if you don't follow what we do, we're just going to kill you and get you out of the way, and then work on the sugar plantations and send it to the U.S. and so on and so forth. So he again, another interesting personality, because he actually lived until the 60s. So during the Japanese period, when Japan defeated us after Pearl Harbor and the Death March, obviously the Japanese tried to parade him around, saying, "Okay, you are here to have a Pan-Asian, all of us Asian bros. We're going to get the white guys out of the neighborhood." But then the history goes back and forth and so on. So those are my 3 points that I wanted to bring up from the Filipino love and Filipino talk.
You did. Thank you very much. So that means you have to come back so we can have more conversation.
Oh, okay.
So now we have to go. We have to get off air. But I wanted to come
thank you,
back.
Babz. Yeah,
This was good. I think this was a great lesson. I think people were very moved by this. I am.
And you have to remember, it all started with a beautiful song from none other than the maestro Nat King Cole, right?
Absolutely.
The song is Dahil Sa'yo. Dahil, D-A-H-I-L S-A, Sa'yo, and Iyo is I-Y-O. You can Google the song. I played it from a Google.
Okay.
So Nat King Cole, Dahil Sa'yo.
I'm gonna find it.
Yeah, again, I hope you find it just as beautiful as I have.
Thank you so much, Sylvester.
Thank you, Babz. Really.
You'll be back. Everybody, Sylvester.
Kisses. Big hugs, CLP hugs, and CLP.
Yeah, CLP hugs. I will see you soon. Thank you so much for being a great guest.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Harry. Play us out.